Thank you. Recognize Mr. Moore of Utah.
Thank you, Chairman. Dr. Corinth, by your estimate, if the administration were to replace the official poverty measure with the supplemental poverty measure, it would increase the government spending on Medicaid and SNAP alone by $124 billion over the next decade. This number would be even higher when you factor in the dozens of other federal and state programs that are based on the official poverty measure. Do you have a sense for how much more it would be spent if every program that relied on this metric were updated to reflect the recommendations by the National Academy of Sciences?
Thank you, Mr. Moore, for the question. So there are over 31 different means-tested programs that are tied to the official poverty line and would thus be affected. Of those, there are 5 entitlement programs where spending would necessarily rise once you increase the poverty line. Of those 5 programs, Medicaid and SNAP are the 2 largest, and that's why I focused on those 2. But other important ones include the ACA, Affordable Care Act premium tax credits, Medicare Part D low-income subsidies, and the National School Lunch Program. Altogether, these 5 programs amounted to $954 billion of spending in 2021. So this would be a big change for these programs to increase eligibility.
And I think, to put it in plain English, what we've kind of heard from both arguments here is that, yeah, it costs more to live in California, and there's more higher costs in places like Washington, D.C., so we should provide more money. If we do that, will that incentivize policymakers in those areas to put in the right policy that will reduce costs over time, the actual problem, or would do the opposite?
It would have the opposite effect. These regulations that drive up things like housing costs or the costs of childcare are really the primary cause for why you have more spending on things like housing and childcare. If you incentivize states to increase costs in order to get more allocations for federal grants, that would be a step in the wrong direction. We should follow the increasingly bipartisan consensus that we need to take on the supply side, reduce regulations so we can build more housing and make more people able to afford basic needs.
Thank you. Professor Basharov, in your testimony, you discussed some of the background, how the official poverty measure was created. While it's not perfect, can you describe how that measure is a useful tool to see how well families are doing in the economy?
Yes, thank you for the question. So if you trace the official poverty measure across recessions and demographic changes, you can see them all in the official poverty measure. You can see the vast increase in retirement wealth that happened to the elderly. You can see the decline in poverty when the economy is doing well. In fact, if you track unemployment with the official poverty measure, you pretty much know what's going to happen to poverty. When you add the SPM, what you're really measuring is government spending. And that's a very valuable thing to have. It's just not the way you keep track of how the economy is treating low-income people. It is the way for measuring how the government is treating low-income people. And those are 2 different things.
Would you, continuing on, Professor, is it true that the presidential administrations regularly use the National Academy of Sciences as the basis for updates on how the federal government measures poverty?
Yes, but I can't imagine a Republican or a conservative president ever doing that again. And if I could spend 15 seconds
Please.
here, we have a president now who might not, but might do this thing. We might have another president who could easily change the table here with 2 changes. Count Medicaid benefits, which the SPM does not do, and count Medicare benefits. You count 2 of those, and you will really shift the table on who gets anti-poverty money. And so the message here, sir, is this is not just about Republicans versus Democrats. This is about Congress asserting the power of the purse to protect its prerogatives.
Thank you. I just want to underscore the point that we're approaching a $2 trillion deficit. We've seen that enormous amount of monetary supply, government spending directly impacts our inflation, and it creates a high inflationary measure. I don't think that can't be rebutted, in my opinion. And if we continue to argue that, look, there's costs are high, things are expensive, we got to give more money in these programs, like that's just simply not going to solve the problem. It's not going to incentivize the right type of policy. I agree with the same concept with tuition. Like, look, let's just kind of forgive some tuition, and then the universities are going to drive their prices down. Like, that is a nonsensical place to be. And we have to be willing to look at how to help people, encourage them to get out of poverty. And that's what this whole entire committee should be focused on. Thank you, and I yield back.